We have a wonderful and charming guest today in Kim Sherman. Kim is the founder of Echo Media. She built the company from the ground up. She is a PR, media, and marketing specialist. She's really done a good job with many of startup companies to very prominent companies we'd know in Orange County. In addition, she's an advocate for nonprofit companies. Great story to listen to. Here we go. Welcome, Kim Sherman. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll continue the conversation. Okay. But you've been in media advertising your whole career. But maybe give us a little intro to what you do or have done, and then we'll kind of peel back maybe a little bit to your past to fill in the gaps, the story.
Okay, so I founded a company called Echo Media Group. That was a spinoff of another company I had, and had that company for 32 years. And really
That's a success right there.
Yeah, wow. I didn't realize.
You're in the top 10% right there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that originally started as a traditional public relations firm back in the day when none of this ever existed. Social media wasn't around. Digital marketing really didn't exist. We were working on newspaper advertising and really working and getting, my specialty was getting clients on TV, radio, in the news.
Yeah, because that was the biggie. When even with real estate, it was interesting when I think back with ads in the newspaper about, we might have a listing or a building and we'd put it in the newspaper
right.
along with physically dropping off brochures and all the kind of that kind of thing. And it's changed a lot since then.
Exactly.
You see that in the recent election, too. The change of media landscape.
Yeah.
Completely.
Well, that was interesting, too, because I think in 2016, he beat them at their own game, and then they shut that down. And then he had to find other channels to beat him again because clearly it wasn't a even playing field. So it's kind of amazing historic.
That was like the
shift.
Social media election, and then this one was the podcast election.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. So a lot to that, but let's peel back a little bit because your story is really fun. So you're an Orange County girl. Mm-hmm. You're native to Orange County. And then, but let's start kind of in college because that was interesting. You went to San Diego, right?
San Diego State.
What did you study when you were down there?
I loved to write, so my major was journalism, English.
Nice.
And I have an identical twin, so the parents couldn't afford to, I really wanted to go to USC. She went to Santa Barbara, I went to San Diego State, and I fell in love with the concept of public relations. I didn't even know it really existed. I think I was sharing with you that I was offered to do an internship. And there was a guy who basically wanted to fill his theater overnight. He was doing a George Lucas film. So I thought I would just...
Now, what did he do? Bring the film in and he wanted to just get bodies there to...
Yes.
Okay, got it, okay.
Yes, so he wanted to fill the theater, but he didn't have a way of really getting the word out.
Yeah.
So I created a campaign and I ran it by all the radio stations and basically said, let's do a contest. If you have... can answer these 3 questions about George Lucas, then you get a free set of tickets for the theater.
Yeah.
That's good.
And we did a little bit of PR around that, which I didn't even know was a thing back then. And we filled the theater. And so he offered me a job. And then that's when I fell in love with the magic of PR.
That is great. But that was perfect. So you're in journalism and then you're doing real life stuff at that moment. I mean, what a perfect combo for kind of launching. Was that near the end of the college studies or during middle?
It was the middle.
Oh,
and
okay.
I was really fortunate in college because I always found a way, back in those days you were making, $5 an hour minimum wage. But I found a way to work with, I worked with a Nobel Peace Prize winner out there. He was dyslexic, so I used to handle all of his paperwork and things like that. And I just fell in love with the concept of PR because it was like magic. You could really create a reaction to an action. And that's what I saw when I started with the gentleman with the George Lucas film, and then started to evolve. And my emphasis was journalism, PR, and a minor in English.
And did you, with your PR, so back then, you're a very good networker, without question. Back then, were you needing to network with the networks? How did you, like, he needs to fill the stadium or whoever you're working with? Are you out there networking with these people to make sure when they take your call, when you need?
How did you break in?
Yeah, how did you kind of do that?
That was my network. It was getting to know. In those days, if you had you had to have the relationship with the reporter, the producer, the on-air talent. So I built a trusted relationship. I think then as I entered my career starting only with law schools. So originally I worked with someone for about a year, and then I decided that I would like to try to do this myself in my 20s, not knowing any better. And I was given the opportunity to work with an Orange County law school, Western State University College of Law. And I really became very close with all the legal reporters, legal journalists. If there were cases in the news, I would book a lot of the professors on air. So Rodney King case, I would work with Greta Van Susteren, O'Reilly Factor. I was working with all the shows because they would come to me because I had this highly vetted team of law professors that could comment in the news. And then I built my specialty around law. And I was invited to speak at the American Bar Association conference.
In Orange County, or where was it at?
It was in LA, and it was a national conference, and it was
Very
about
cool.
media exposure.
Yeah.
And back then, in the legal profession, you really were not allowed to promote your practice. So I gave a presentation around that, and was really just a new beginner at that.
What falls under the bucket of public relations versus advertising, versus the different types of exposure? What's PR?
PR is really about, in my opinion, it's really about crafting your message, whatever it's going to be, right? And then packaging your message in I like to think, true editorial style. So that's trying to get a reporter interested in the story itself, right? For example, we used to try a lot of cases in the media that way, and we would direct them to facts. What's been filed in the court system? Can they look at a legal brief? They would build their stories around that. So PR back in the day was really around true journalism and facts and information and telling the facts. It wasn't, that was the goal of the media outlet, was to share the story. Today, PR has changed because now it encompasses everything. Telling your story goes across the entire marketing communication spectrum. PR, social media, digital marketing. That same message is carried all the way through. So it's evolved greatly. And then there's another layer of public relations now that is what they call sponsored content. So it's where you can buy editorial coverage and control the narrative of the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We certainly see it.
What was that one called? What was that called?
Sponsored content.
Sponsored content. Okay.
So now it's like the social media influencers are sort of the mouthpiece, right, rather than the traditional news apparatus.
Yes.
Yeah.
That didn't exist when I started in the 90s, and now they're there. And then there's layers within the social media spectrum as well. There's the macro influencers, there's the micro influencers, there's the Kim Kardashians of the world, right? And so really being able to determine who is going to bring the most value and authenticity and carrying through your brand, that would be determined in who you would select to be an influencer.
That was kind of interesting when we were talking with Mike from Caitlin Designs when he, one of the influencers picked up their product and made a comment about it, and then all of a sudden, it was over the holidays, they're swamped with business because they, the public got the wind of it.
It's
that was cool.
Not too different than the like traditional PR stuff that you're talking about as well, right? It's like you get a news broadcaster that picks up your story and talks about it,
right?
And you have a broad audience.
Do you think the job of getting your message out today is easier because there are so many more channels, or harder because it's so much more subtle and like, the sponsored content versus the organic, whatever it is? Like, is it easier or harder or just different?
I think it's different. I think back to some of the reason that I loved what I got to do is, again, I got to kind of create this magic. So I'll give an example. When I was working with Western State University College of Law, they had the SBA president there, and he was inspired to go to law school because he had been convicted of rape, and he was put in jail. But he decided, and he was innocent. So when he was in law school, he decided he wanted to go to law school to help others. A DNA report came through and proved his innocence. So I was able to take that story, and we were on every daily newspaper. And again, it's the timeliness of the verdict there. We were on all of the top national morning shows around it. It was a really authentic story, right? So, and it just it spiraled within, this was a 24-hour period. But today, I think there's twofold, because you have the opportunity to expand the way you tell your story. For example, even sharing this podcast, right? This didn't exist back then.
Right.
And telling the stories behind the scene, and now you can bring that through in so many different channels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of a dilemma, like with as many that are out there. I guess the other advantage is that you can pick the channel. You just talking about influencers. I mean, stuff. So if you're a product company, it seems to me an influencer would be huge, because if you have this neat idea, I call it the Apple Music thing. If you come up with a great song, in the old days you had to record it, concert it, try to get people interested. Eventually they might make a record, whatever.
Right.
It'd take forever. Now you get a great song and it's out there.
Right.
Sort of like a great product, it kind of goes, maybe. But, going back when you were, so you're doing, were you outsourced by Western State? In other words, were you on your own by then, or, okay.
That was my first client.
Okay.
And
so you
then,
weren't working for them, they were your client.
They were my first client. So I was fortunate enough that I had been working with an agency, and I was allowed to take them as a client. And it wasn't a big money client, but it was what I loved, and I really was able to dive in and learn everything. I worked with them to grow their universities, open Thomas Jefferson School of Law, work with them to get ABA accreditation. And I would, do everything from work with the registrar's office to look at, okay, what's the trend in law school? And then we identified that, one, there were a number of police officers turning into lawyers, and doctors turning into lawyers, because they were having to face, circumstances on their job. And so I was given free rein. So I created, the Badge and Gavel Society, and I created an organization for lawyers who were also doctors. I got to do a lot of creative things, and that evolved into my ability to work with a number of law firms, state bar associations, Orange County Bar Association. Program is Shortstop, which is a juvenile program to keep kids out of jail. And so that's kind of where it evolved. I had a business partner who was fabulous, and it was our specialty for a while. And then we decided if we could do that for lawyers, we could probably do that for everyone. And we started to mainstream and working with companies and products across the United States and actually internationally.
But when you're doing that, were you up in Orange County?
In Orange County,
yes.
yes.
Okay. Wasn't so you had come back up. Yeah.
And I started.
I remember your first building you bought.
Yes.
You were talking about that was tough, just making the decision to plunk the money down and do it.
It was great. So I started my business out of my home in Rancho Santa Margarita, and then started to rent it out, one of the most expensive properties in Orange County because I didn't know better, and was paying a fortune. And continued to grow that. And September 11th happened. So I had the company now for maybe, I want to say 9 years.
Okay.
This was Echo at this point, or this is pre-Echo?
This was, Echo was a spinoff of Communication Advocates.
Okay.
So September 11th
That's a good name
happened.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good name too.
It was great. And September 11th came about, and the phone just went dead. And of course, people were reluctant to spend their money on marketing at that point in time. And I had a pretty big staff and a nice building that we were renting. There was like 8 or 9 offices in there. And the bottom line is that I needed to take control of my own destiny. So I took the chance to buy my first building. And I scraped together every penny I had. I was scared to death. It was $186,000, and I barely thought, I was petrified. How was I going to make that rent and everything? But I didn't want to be beholden to a landlord.
Yeah,
and that's
smart.
what was going on. So I figured if I could rent the building to myself, I could control the destiny. And that was the first introduction into commercial real estate.
Well, and you kind of parlayed that into your bigger building that sort of had a very cool vibe to it. How did that play? I mean, because you had employees by then, and how does space in your mind play to the success of a company? You had a very neat, the way you set it up.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
And thanks to you. I absolutely loved our space that we found. It was perfect. It reminded me of Mad Men,
Yes.
very open.
Yes.
We were
Kind of neat finishes too. Yeah.
It was gorgeous. And I had a girlfriend of mine who wanted to start her own interior design company. So I was her first project. That project
That's
and
good.
also the Oakley building. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
She was fantastic. And she came in, and I was able to get the entire floor done meticulously from somebody who hand did that. She decorated it all. We painted it all. I mean, it was a gorgeous space, and it was a little bit of a showpiece for us. We would hold events there. Our clients would use the space. I would allow, I work with a lot of nonprofits. Over the years, they would come and they would host their events there. So it was just this center for creativity, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see that like when nowadays a lot of people have worked from home and with COVID and do you see that working long term? I mean, you've hired people, you've needed to collaborate. What's your opinion? I mean, we all have our best guess at what's going to happen, but what do you think on that?
Well, my opinion that it's not a long-term play, this situation where people are working from home. And it was, we also, so Echo continued throughout COVID, stay at home. I went to the office every single day. So some folks did come in that were colleagues of mine that wanted a place to go and get away. But there's something special about coming together and the creativity around it. You just can't get that through Zoom. Mm-hmm. You have to have the eye to eye and those aha moments. And I don't think that the work from home is a long-term play, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
We're seeing a little bit of that because of the training, sort of the environment. But some of the tools that came out of it, like Zoom, if you need to talk to somebody in Chicago, it's rather than having to get on a plane, people are a little more comfortable with that technology, which is really good. But I think going back to that, but the other thing you were saying that culturally, when you were setting up the new office, because you had events there, you were hiring people, it did impact possibly hires because it was a very nice environment which to work. So to recruiting, was it helpful or?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And the clients, I mean, they loved to come in and see the space, and the way it was set up, it was very open, right?
Yeah.
So there were 2 conference rooms. Everybody had their own offices, and the clients loved it. They liked to see the interconnectivity of, we had grown from a PR agency to having websites, landing pages, digital marketing, media buying. We had what else? We had a creative team, a design team, you know, you name it. It was a collaborative of really about 8 divisions: content writing, social media strategy, and they could see the inner workings of the agency, and that there was a collective group there that worked in a cohesive fashion. And so that was kind of the magic of what we had.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I had a question. So, I mean, you know, the agency business essentially is people, right? You're a people person. You're one of the best networkers we know. Like when you're hiring people, how do you vet them? What do you think about when you're talking to hiring somebody, and like, what's that process for you?
Instinct?
You know what, this is going to be funny, but one coach told me you hire for TNA, which is talent and attitude. And it's true. If they had it wasn't always so much about their credentials. It was about their talent, their attitude. We had to really, as an agency, adapt to. I mean, we were not proficient in social media. One of my top executives really came from political affairs and very old school industries, but she did incredible work. So together we had to learn these ropes, right? And a lot of the next generation that came in were able to teach us as well. And they weren't traditionally born, right? Everybody did typically have a degree of some sort, but we always liked people that had the ambition to take on internships, and whether paid or not. So talent and attitude was important. And then I think the building really did inspire a lot of those folks to want to be a part of our team because they were motivated and they could collaborate.
Your kind of work too is super creative kind of work, and I think that you mentioned having people together, having a space that fosters creativity. How do you create a culture of creativity? It's something I've been thinking about in our business. Getting our creative minds together to think about what's happening in the market. How are we engaging in the market? How are we really thinking about our clients and what they need? And creating that space. The time and the time space and the space to be creative, to have 8 divisions work, that flow. How do you create that?
That's $1 million question.
Yeah, and it is the most important thing, I think, is to allow that time and space for creativity, because you can work like in a technician kind of a way, right, and just deliver in that format, but our clients were looking to us to bring something different to the table, right? They wanted us to come up with concepts that were a little outside of the box and unique. And
that's why you went for the Mad Men look, because that's what they did. They sat around and, but there's a lot to that.
Yeah, and we would have, collaborative lunches every week. We would have planning sessions every quarter. At the end of the year, we would do kind of vision mapping sessions. There was no idea that was off the table. There was a lot of ideas that were inspired, again, by this younger generation. But it was really important because you could get really stuck in the day-to-day and just do the tactical work. In my opinion, there's a lot of technicians out there that can produce social content or deliver a digital marketing campaign, but they want to know what is something special,
And it's hard to think of industries that have changed more in the last 30 years than media. Right. And so having to reinvent yourself, your thinking, your practice, to adapt to that, it's not an easy thing to do. We're adapting to it. We're trying to figure out, the brokerage of the 1990s was postcards and mailers and things like that. And, is that changing? How is that changing? Here we are, sitting and talking in a new media kind of format.
And we find that the old media is needed for people that like a tangible look. So because we're representing property owners to market property. So we're trying to find all those channels to make sure that property is exposed. But we're also over here doing the old, which it's not old. It's just what works with certain demographic people, audience. And then we're over here on the new with digital and trying to get out in front of it and make sure that these properties are exposed. And all the while we're networking with our colleagues to make sure we're approachable, that they know we're cooperative in the community, to get things done. So I think that's it is. It's changed. You almost have to adapt as you go to all these things and just incorporate them as best you can. But it has been a big change.
Yeah.
It really has, because it's a very saturated market, right?
Yeah.
So for me, even looking at the next commercial property, which we've now transitioned that second building into a third building, courtesy of Tidemark,
Right.
Which has been, quite honestly, a real gift for me for financially, right, to have that ability to.
Well, you took the chance at the 186, the first building, and just parlayed it,
Yeah.
But now the equity's working for you, so that's it's fabulous what you've done with it.
Right.
And you were disciplined, so you made sure you kept your debt in order and kept the equity moving. So that's the
Right.
biggie.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is a very saturated market, and you have to be able to kind of bud the noise in a very unique way, So it's that outside of the box idea around it.
Were most of the, like you were saying with the TNA, were most of them women that you hired, or a mix?
It was a mix. So
Okay.
I had an incredible digital marketing professional that came in. We just adored him. And he was an incredible leader for his team.
Okay.
But I liked the balance because he was no drama. There was no, you just knew what you were going to get every single day. And then we had the women. So we were a very dynamic group, a ton of A-type personalities in there. But it was men and women. We had our mix for
That's
sure.
good.
And then we built out on top of it. So we had an agency of about 15. And then we built out a tier 2 network of videographers, media buyers, a team around the United States that we can call in as we needed them, because our clients were national, and previously they were international. We brought a number of companies in from Europe into the U.S. marketplace. So, but really, it all begins with the same thing, which is the messaging. It's the messaging. What do you want to communicate? What you're trying to do, and then how do you reach your audience with that messaging?
Yeah, powerful too if you do it right. For
Right.
sure. Especially you see it nowadays with the speed at which some things do go viral and all that.
Have you guys incorporated ChatGPT and other like large language models in your process?
Yes.
What's your take on that? Like, how do you see that sort of shaping your industry and maybe broadly?
I think we were really, some of us were really opposed to it in the beginning, but now I think it's fabulous. But I think it has to be a combination of creative thinking and then using some of those platforms, because the creative thinking can never be replaced. It just really can't. It just can't. That's where I have, throughout my career, had the great opportunity to transform a number of companies. I helped one company out of a major crisis situation that they were in. Right around this time at Thanksgiving, they were a company that was being recognized because they had a platform to analyze return fraud and abuse, and they were being called out as being a blacklister, because you would go into a Victoria's Secret or something like that, and they would ask you to swipe your ID if you were returning a product, and blacklister. They were calling out this company as a blacklister, but in reality, they were saving retailers and consumers tons of money because they were curbing retail fraud and abuse. And we were able to...
Oh, so they know the same person that was coming back?
Yes.
Because they had, okay.
serial abusers, right?
Yeah, right.
And so everybody wanted their story. They were being inundated with the media. I was fortunate enough for them to entrust me with that story. And we picked 2 media outlets, Tom Brokaw, if you remember, and the Wall Street Journal. And we had those stories break right before Thanksgiving. And then we gave all the other media outlets, there was about 160, our messaging package. And that transformed the company. They aligned with lobbyist groups. They aligned with consumer advocacy groups. They went on to grow that business. They sold that business.
Wow.
That's creative thinking, right? You really can't get that through a ChatGPT.
Right.
Even though I think ChatGPT adds to the mix of it all.
What have you found to be the most productive uses so far in your workflow of like ChatGPT and similar things?
It's just really kind of running through. I'm not very proficient, to be honest with it, in the way that I should be, but I'll run through content, or I might run through social posts, or I might run through letters, but I'm not, I really need to, engage with it. That's part of the whole process.
Yeah, and you're, kind of hitting that with as busy as you were, and this is sort of the woman-owned business part of this is, I know you have a couple of adult children, right? And you had to balance all that through your life. And it's almost like for women, you in a way, you have to be superhuman if you're doing the kinds of things you're doing. Because like with my wife, I feel like I've cheated because she was such a great partner. I never had to worry about anything, right? My focus was there and it was very helpful, and I never had to kind of deviate from that. But that's not the case for women, typically.
Right.
So how did you kind of deal with that? I mean, because other women might be interested because they're stressed with, what you're trying to pull off.
It was funny because I loved running my own company because I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. But the reality was that I worked all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And for much of the time, I was a single mom raising my kids. So it was really a challenging mix. But it was part of the fabric of Echo Media Group to have a work-life balance. And a lot of the women that worked with Echo and stayed with Echo and are still with Echo were able to raise their children. Same with the dads. The gentleman that I mentioned that ran our digital marketing got married later in life, and he already had older kids. Now he just had another baby. And so that work-life balance was really important to us. And I felt like I was able to set that stage because I needed the same level of flexibility.
Well, and were there any times that you're toting the kids along and you got to go to a meeting, or how did? Oh yeah, there's got to be those times when you're like, okay, we got to go.
Oh yeah, I mean, my daughter, if she was sick, she would sit under my desk. I'd build her a fort, and she would just hang out there. Same thing. Any of the others could bring in their kids.
Yeah,
and we would sometimes have a couple kids hanging out there. We had little areas for them. In the last building we had, there was one really cool room in there. And during COVID, I set up an air mattress in there. We had a TV in there. They were just hanging out in there. I mean,
that's great.
The kids would come in. At one point, I thought we should actually have like a little daycare, but it was fun. And then they would join us. The kids would join us because we do a ton of charity work. So we did a lot with Someone Cares Soup Kitchen, which was influenced by Wahoo's brother's parents. We did a lot with Olive Crest.
Wait, the parents were involved in it?
Wahoo's brothers, their parents had a restaurant, and this woman...
Down on the island, yeah.
It was, I think it was in Costa Mesa around 19th Street.
Oh, okay.
And this woman wanted to feed the homeless and the less fortunate, and they opened up the restaurant to her.
Oh, okay.
And that was the start
Very
of
cool.
Someone Cares Soup Kitchen.
Okay.
So Echo was part twice of a dream team that raised $110,000 in 110 days twice. And everybody was involved.
For the kitchen, the 110?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic.
And then we went and served there, which was one of the most amazing experiences. But when we would do these projects, we would bring the kids in, too. They would be a part of the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of PR, remember the picture of John F. Kennedy when his son was under the desk and at work? Did you guys remember that photo?
Yeah.
That's probably one of the most iconic photos ever, and I think endeared the public to JFK, the president, because it made him human, and it was kind of cool. That's kind of what I had in my head when I was thinking the kids are there on the floor and
hanging out. It was easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, as the kids got older, they would come and they would intern for Echo as well.
Oh yeah.
So it just continued on forever, or we would give them jobs. So it truly was a family.
My daughter just turned 8, and her birthday fell over her fall break at school, so she had kind of flexibility, and we asked her like what she wanted to do for her birthday, and she wanted to come to work with me.
That was so cute.
Did
So she
come to work?
She did. She came into the office. She was mostly in Jim's office.
So it was my day. I had the best day.
Start putting her to work.
Right?
I know.
Yeah, so we went to
stand.
lunch with her, and we're hanging out together. It was great. So anytime you want to do that, that's fine.
That was her choice of anything you can do on your birthday.
Yeah.
She wanted to come to work.
Yeah, she's a sweetheart. She's But like with now going forward, are you more involved in charities? What's kind of what's your next chapter? What are you thinking?
Well, now that I've sold Echo Media Group, I like you said, I have a really big network, and there's a lot of incredible people in Orange County. Orange County is just this amazing hub that I had the chance to work with. So I've created alignments with other agencies that I would like to support with new business. And then also, I feel very blessed that over the last 32 years, I've had the opportunity to kind of do things my way, right or wrong. So I'm surrounded by a lot of incredible women that I think are trailblazers in Orange County. And I also see this next gen level of trailblazers coming up that would benefit from the mentorship and just some kind of a community right around that. So I'm actually going to be working on trying to build that out. I'm starting with my own journey on that and coaching on that and trying to build my story, my messaging around that so I can share that with others, but then identifying the right community that can help facilitate that long term.
And so many amazing women entrepreneurs that you've introduced us to, a couple we've enjoyed meeting and trying to figure out how we might do business with them and so on, but just really fascinating and how that's improving the fabric. You're mentioning Orange County being a powerhouse. It is.
Yes.
Because I don't believe, and it'll follow with a question, there must be some advantages and disadvantages being a woman in business, but to me it's like this, because there's a lot of advantages too, because whether it's a doctor or a PR person, there's advantages. Have you felt that through? Now times have changed, but how has that felt to you? The being a woman in business. I guess you don't know what it'd be like to be a man, I suppose, but
you were a trailblazer.
Yeah, in a way, right?
Thank you.
Things have changed now, but it's amazing what you accomplished.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know. I think I like being a woman in business. I've had the chance to work with a lot of very high-profile CEOs. One is my absolute favorite. His name's Ron Simon. Just adored him.
Yeah, I don't know him, but very nice things that people have to say about him for sure.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I got to work with him through the Simon Scholars Association. He's given millions and millions of dollars to help these kids get through high school and into college. I mean, and hundreds.
What was his original company? I don't remember.
He had a company that he sold to American Woodmark for, it was a kitchen and bath. They manufactured cabinets.
Oh, okay,
they
gotcha.
reinvented the industry through cabinet manufacturing.
Yeah.
And I was able to work with him. So I worked with him on his nonprofit for years, probably 20 years, actually.
Oh, wow.
And he allowed me to do some fabulous things with him through his cabinet manufacturing company. But then he took the same concept and he applied it to home building. And he sold that company to William Lyons and still out there doing his thing. But I enjoyed working. I really enjoyed working with a lot of these high-powered men because they were very open and receptive to these ideas. I mean, they were trailblazers themselves, obviously. Right. That's how I met my husband,
right.
Steve Pixley from AutoCriv as well.
Yeah.
Got to work with him on launching a product as well. And so it was interesting because I felt like there was a lot of allowance to do creative things. And but I also love the network of the women that I work with. They're just doing the most phenomenal things right now.
Yeah. And they do bring a different touch.
Right.
Kind of like you were saying in your office, the men bring a different touch, and maybe that balance is healthy. Half of our office, I think, is women now, and certainly, but it's been fun, being in part of your network and seeing with that. If you were talking to your daughter or others, what would be some inspiring words for them, or have there been mentors that stand out in your mind's eye that gave you some words of wisdom? Kind of anything that really kind of cements you or makes you feel good about sharing that advice or what you received from somebody else.
Well, I'm a big believer in coaches. So throughout my entire career, I've always had coaches. I started with a woman named Joan Smith, and I really loved working with her. And she just, it's opening your thinking, being courageous, being fearless, just going for it, knowing that if you make a mistake, it's okay because I've made a ton of them along my way. I mean, I lost my company in September of, I think it was 2001, right? I lost my company, had to start over. It was a scary time.
Yeah.
That's why I invested in commercial real estate,
Yeah.
right? But I don't know. There's been so many messages along the way. I then moved into a male coach that I worked with forever. I did the MAP program. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it was just these. I feel that you get the message at the right time of where you need to go and what you need to do. But there hasn't been, one specific thing. But then at the same time, I try to pass it on to my daughter, who's now in college, and she was just talking to me on the way over here as a freshman at U of A, and is the only freshman to have been elected to a committee in her sorority. She's head of this merchandising department. And I'm like, you just have to go with it, and you'll be the next generation of trailblazers,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
She was an interesting story. I feel like maybe I see this in her. When she was in junior high or elementary school, there were some kids that were bullying each other online. So she created a platform called LFMS. It was, you could only provide compliments on there for kids. And it was completely anonymous. And she built this out.
Wow.
And it was really cool because
That's
people
fun.
just started using it.
Brilliant, really.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Cool concept. So,
Because it was kind of early where they could bully and hide.
Yes.
And
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's good advice, though. I mean, the coaching thing. I mean, we're lucky enough to have been born with a coach here,
right.
but it goes back to like being in the office. It's like it's really only the way you can learn is be around people that have done it and listen, be open minded, and try to grow, and hopefully they support you.
yes. And I know it's crazy to say this but my husband's probably my biggest mentor and coach. I mean, constantly trying to give me courage and, but buying the next building, I really was not inspired to sell that building, except that we were originally looking to sell Echo previously, and that kind of got the wheels spinning. But having that, you can do this,
Yeah,
it's going to be
support.
fine, right?
Well, and you followed the market. I mean, we talked about, getting people back to the office and so on. The office market really has suffered because of the COVID effect. And your building, when you had this long run of using it, it had creativity to it, but when it came time to either rent it, the economics weren't there. You were smart to take that equity and move it into a cash flow position, because otherwise you're sitting on sort of a dead asset.
Right.
And that took courage too, I know. And so we congratulate you on that, because you gotta constantly be innovating, even in real estate, where and maybe off topic to you, but what we're trying to do is work with companies that want to do the same things that you're talking about. How do we do that? Sometimes it's in their best interest to lease for they don't have to put the capital in. They can get out there and be light on their feet.
Right.
Sometimes it's good to buy because they're stable or a little more stable, and they can take advantage of being an owner of real estate, and everything in between. And what we found over time, if that magic hits right and they're able to profit from their company, they're then investing even more in real estate. So that's the wealth builder, where they're able to take what they've owned and then turn it into wealth building, and then on top of it, invest a little bit more money in it, and just try to parlay that up. And the Ron Simons of the world, and the people that Steve Pixley and the people we know that have done very well tend to end up retiring on some of that real estate related income. And that's what we're trying to do is really look at that globally and take care of our customers in the right way, so that there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And you guys have done a great job at that.
I would encourage anybody who owns a business to buy a piece of property, because it just makes so much sense. But the thing that I appreciated about working with Tidemark is the fact that we looked at the whole picture, right? what were the interest rates setting at? I mean, at one point I had an interest rate on my building of 2.9%.
Yeah.
You couldn't beat
Yeah.
that, right?
Right.
Because I was owner occupied.
Right.
But then, and so that was an asset in and of itself. So we were analyzing everything, and you had no skin in the game. It wasn't. I was just being given the information to make a smart decision. But then the timing seemed right. We looked at the interest rates. We looked at the trends. We looked at warehouse space because I also was able to convert into should we consider that, right? I mean, there were so many
Exactly. We kind of
factors.
broke it into pieces. Like, what if we take it back to industrial? What if we
Right.
keep it the way it is? What if we take the money and go reinvest? And that's sort of the exploration of that. And I know you dove in big time on that.
Yes.
And
That's kind of the fun part of it, and the thing that's interesting too is like when you're in the situation that you were in, you sort of do have to see what the market's doing, right? So you put it out for sale, you put it out for lease, and then you start having these conversations to better understand like what your position is, because initially you might not always know who's interested in leasing or who's interested in buying and what's available to buy. So that's sort of the journey, I think.
For sure. And we had a very unique space to work with because a lot of it had been built out, right? So there was just so many factors, but I had total faith in the process, and it was right on the money. What you said, I think it took us 4 months right through the whole process.
Yeah.
But by and large, that's good advice. I think that for people that have taken the leap, are in the real estate market or will be, if they can afford to own and do it, as long as it doesn't tie them down too much, that's when it gets into, is leasing better for. We've had a couple of people on this that they were better off leasing because their growth was so fast that it's sort of like you got to be able to lily pond, right? You're jumping like a frog from one to the other, and you're better off letting the profits run, so to speak.
Right.
And what's the when you sell the companies, it's based on sort of, it can be your gross revenue or it can be net revenue, however it's sold, but that plays in too. That's part of the decision. The weird part, it's not just the real estate of how it affects the financials of the company and all that too.
Exactly. Right. Because I believe you take that leap of faith, right? You now control your own destiny. You can rent your building to yourself. You get all the tax benefits associated with it. I mean, there is so much that pertains to it. And when I was renting over on Bristol Street in Costa Mesa. I couldn't control the rent. When COVID happened with the building with Echo, I was able to control that destiny. There was a lot of benefits for owners of the buildings at that time. I mean, it really saved our ability to continue to perform.
Right.
It was a very odd time.
Well, and looking back, I mean, what I'm hearing is sort of, if we go back and repeat, I mean, your first project, the George Lucas fill up the stadium, was sort of organic. You just did it. You got yourself in there and did it. You had to just jump in and kept rolling with it. So it must have been some intuition on your part, just as because I'm hearing what you're saying is you're just rolling forward into bigger and bigger things. So is that what it was? Just intuitively knowing that I just got to follow this bouncing ball kind of, because you weren't forcing it. It didn't sound like you're forcing, I want to be in this sector or I've got to be over here.
I'm very non-traditional in the way that I think, which drives people crazy sometimes as well, because I can see things in my opinion that are possibilities that, and it's having that balance, right?
Yeah.
So my one of the top people that I worked with over at Echo, her perspective was totally different. So we would counterbalance each other out. But I like to really see the possibilities and kind of just go with it. One of the things that, as an example with Echo, we did a lot with charities. We helped to launch the Civic 50 initiative for 10C, and we did this work with Soup Kitchen, et cetera. And the reason I like that is because we were volunteering. And so no matter what we did, it was still good. And everybody got to learn from it. And they were appreciative of the organizations we worked with, were appreciative. But I feel like you have to be able to try some things outside of the box. Otherwise, you're just the same as everybody else, right?
Did a lot of your clients end up being entrepreneurs or, in entrepreneurial endeavors as well? or more sort of corporate established type operations?
It was a mixture of both. So when I started in the day, it was law schools, law firms, very, very, conservative kind of thinkers, right? And then I love working with the entrepreneurs because they want to go for it as well, right? But when we grew Echo and we were at a different size, we really wanted the mid-tier client that wanted to hit the ground running and needed every service of ours. So, for example, when ERC came through, you guys remember the employee retention tax credit, there was a company that was coming onto the scene, and they had to go like 200% overnight. And so we were brought in, we were helping with PR, social media, landing pages, digital marketing. We did all their media buying. We did sports sponsorship deals for them, working with everybody from Barstool Sports to, working with like Chicago Cubs and things like that. All the local organizations, we set up affiliate partnership programs, and we were able to do that quickly because of the infrastructure of the company, and we loved doing that. And then, of course, everything we did had to be analyzed and tracked to see if it was moving the needle for them. Yeah. But so that was kind of the sweet spot for Echo.
It's impressive. I mean, what an operation to get.
Yeah. It was incredible.
At the flip of a switch.
But and you mentioned, repeat that just so it kind of cemented in my mind. You worked with so many mid-market companies that they were beyond the startup, and you worked with startups, but the mid-market companies. So not all of them are meteor, they're stable or they're growing, but how do they determine, or how did you, when you sit down with them and maybe give an example, what do you really do? I mean, you sit down and you got to get the messaging right, you said. You have to get what their goals are right, but you're also, which you've helped us, thank you very much, you've layered on creative ideas. So it opens their eyes. Is that the magic where, they have their ideas and you have, and then there's a blend there? Because how does it really take shape? I mean, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it's exactly the process we went through. We threw out a bunch of ideas. None of them really resonated. They were a little bit, this is what we can do. And we stumbled upon this concept with Zelle Media, which is amazing. But it's a combination of the both, because most of the time, the folks that are in the role of CEO or the CMOs we work with often as well, but they're not thinking marketing, right? They're thinking of how they're going to manufacture this product, get it to market, all this stuff they have to go on. So it's really kind of my job is to listen and learn and look at all of the opportunities and find out where there is that little magic bullet that we can work with. But then it's also building all the foundational information as well, right? So if we're leading them to a website, that messaging needs to match with what we're saying in the media or on social media or in their collateral materials or at their trade shows, right? It's really hearing what they're saying, but then giving them a different take on it, perhaps, or validating that they're heading in the right direction. But truly, it's usually a combination of both.
And it's tricky. I'm just thinking when you're saying that for any company, and I'm just thinking Tidemark for 1 second, where real estate's been very much a push marketing industry. We're pushing this, we're great, this is perfect, and really what it boils down to for the consumer is connecting with a relationship that can bear fruit and get in with people that are inside the market, because one of the hardest things about commercial real estate is having access to the property, because there's a limited supply, there's all these pressures going on. So I just say that out loud because I know you're helping us.
Right.
and we're trying to invite that inquiry, because typically that inquiry is very interesting. I mean, you helped a company over in Irvine that was having a very difficult time finding a building. What were they in before? I'm talking about Pair Eyewear. What size were they in before they?
Yeah, they were just expanding. They
couldn't find that combination.
Yeah, and they, all these entrepreneurs, it seems like it would be an easy process when you start doing it, and then when you start to get in the weeds, you realize how complicated it is.
Yeah.
So it's
and we're trying to simplify that complexity, but I think that's good. I mean, with with the way you listen, the way you network, I think the way you create the ideas. I love that because you'll throw ideas out and some may not resonate, but it's very helpful actually. And I think that's where most of these mid-markets or startups, could really use help. I think is listening to, wait a minute, that could work. If we do it this way. So I think that is your real strength to me. Thank
you. A lot of people want to know what the mechanics are behind it, but sometimes it's just the concept, and then we put it into play. I've also had the opportunity to serve on a number of boards, and that was really cool because I was on the Greater Irvine Chamber of Commerce board for 6 years. I was on the 10C board, and I got to sit in the room with 30 other executives from all different industries and learn.
Yeah.
So it's really, I think it's a matter of the observing and understanding and listening and then being a reflection back, right? I always share that I'm an identical twin. But
how do we know she's not here?
She's not here. And I told her I need to go do her networking for her, and I'll just pretend I'm here. But I would say I was like the behind the scenes twin. So that just naturally my role, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
I think the thing that I've recognized about you too is you really care, and we try to do that too. Is when we have a client, we do everything we can genuinely to do it. And you do it for us, you want to help genuinely. It's not about I want to get a new client or have new business. It's you're just always helping people. And I think that's an amazing thing.
Great quality.
One of my philosophies is give before you get. I am genuinely interested, right? Mm-hmm. When I was working with you, I'm like, oh, Taylor needs to meet this guy and that guy. They all need each other, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's... That's where the magic. I would say show up and the magic will happen, and that's it. And I feel fortunate right now to be in this phase of my life where I have the freedom to continue. I really want to. I created a new consulting business called Open Door Consulting, and it's just to open doors, right?
Okay.
For agencies, new business, nonprofit, trailblazing women. This is what I'm trying to build right now. I don't know what the framework's like yet, but
I love that.
know it'll come.
That's cool.
What would be, look back, and it's just an open question if you don't have an answer, but what if you had to think, what was the biggest thrill, whether it was, growing Echo, was it some meeting you had? Is there one that stands out that's kind of fun to talk about? Probably lots.
Huh?
Probably a lot of them, but.
There's just so many stories, right?
Yeah.
I think about being a part of that dream team for Someone Cares Soup Kitchen was really cool because I was brought in to be a part of the team and being able to give back in that way. I was learning from the group that I was involved with. And then through that, I met my husband.
Yeah.
Indirectly through launching a product for somebody within that. But there's tons of stories like that. The story that I shared with you about that company that I helped through that crisis situation, I was scared to death. I was not sure that this was going to work. And,
right.
But it did.
Yeah.
It transformed a business as a result of it. And I've seen that across the board with Western State University College of Law. All those stories that I told, their professors were being brought in limousines to the studio to be on these shows. I had no fear. I have no fear, right?
Yeah.
So there's a million stories along the way like that.
That's great. And I've always said, when you think back, work in itself is a blessing and being an entrepreneur is a blessing.
Yes.
Why? Because you have these relationships you develop. Why? Because you're doing things. Why? Because you're exercising your creativity. Mm-hmm. Even if it flops, the learning is so dramatic. There's so much learning that goes on, you can't lose. So I think that's a big thing we're just so thrilled to have you on and some of our entrepreneurs because every one of these we've learned something.
Mm-hmm. No question.
Haven't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, when I lost my company and I bought that building, I was scared to death. And it was a small condo, right? So instead of paying the rent by myself, I put my entire team in one room. We had our desk, and I rented out the building, right?
Yeah.
Because I thought, oh gosh, it's $1,100 a month. I'm going to die, right? But
Very smart.
and I had lost my business, so I had to go back and identify. Okay, we don't have no money right now, but I came up with a plan to pay all of our vendors off. I had a gal who worked with me. I said, if we can get them to write off some of it, I'll give you a percentage, et cetera. But I was not afraid then, even though I was making no money and raising my kids, you know? But yes, you're right. I think there's a freedom of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've done a good job of it. And I think that, you know, all the things you've done in your life and the people you've helped, you know, you can't even probably know how much you've helped people. So that's really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excited for your next chapter too.
I
This is
know.
gonna be-
Thank
I know.
you.
We're so glad you came.
Thank you.
Like I said, the commonality of what you're doing here and telling the stories about just growth and leadership and the impact that commercial property has on that, I think is really an interesting take on.
Yeah, it's important. We were just talking to Kobe and Kyler here at Zill about that a minute ago, and you guys have been a real blessing to us to get this going and give us the confidence to give it a shot. And so thank you guys. It's amazing. Yeah, yeah. And thanks for introducing us to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kim.
Kim.
They're only going to explode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fun stuff,
Cool.
guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.